So how long is this peace and love going to last?
Well, the peace and love is going to last at least through another round of negotiations between the teams to see if they can get back to the type of deal that the U.S. anticipated it was going to get 2 months ago. But what we see now is that we're fully a year as of this past weekend, into the tariffs being imposed by the U.S. against China. So this really has to be getting down to determining whether we can get a deal or not. The fact is that a year of not yet having a deal leads us all to believe that we're probably less likely to get this deal than we were roughly 9 months ago, where I think there was a high degree of optimism that the gaps could be bridged.
Yeah. Who needs a deal more? The president going into an election year, or the Chinese, just simply because they have suffered a bit because of the trade fight?
Well, it depends on the state of the U.S. economy. I think there are many within the White House who say that if not now, when, meaning the U.S. economy is strong, and if we can't do this, or their view, we can't do this in a strong U.S. economy, then we can't do it any time. But if we see any signs of weakening in the U.S. economy, or more pain on the part of farmers in the U.S. who are paying this essentially off their backs because of reduced sales to China, then I think we'll see the equation shift where the president needs to get a deal. But right now, I'd say the sides are pretty evenly matched, and really has to be seen whether China can make the hard, long-term commitments that are necessary for the U.S. And the U.S., having now taken this path, needs to get significant commitments from China, not just words, but changes in the Chinese statutes to ensure there's a level playing field going forward.
You think they can get that? I mean, that's a heavy lift.
It is
in the big picture.
Look, it's a very heavy lift, and we've known that for over a year. I mean, when the U.S. came out with a very damning report that talked about the forced technology transfers, the cyber theft, the way that China was trying to drive its intellectual property business and industry at the expense of foreign enterprises and the U.S. knew that they were asking for the toughest thing from China. Since that time, we've had some progress in the negotiations around a possible set of purchases, but they really haven't gone to the heart of why the U.S. launched this in the first place. And then on top of this now, we have the headwinds of what the U.S. is doing around Huawei. So the environment's actually tougher today than it was when we began this a year ago, and it was already a difficult ask that the U.S. was seeking of China.
Ambassador, is it plausible to have a two-stage deal so that both sides can kind of agree on certain parts of it now, they can both get through their short-term issues, and then could President Trump sort of re-engage again after an election?
Well, it's essentially what China was proposing to do, and what it seemed several months ago President Trump was inclined to do, which is to have a large number of purchases of American products announced by the Chinese government. The president would then be able to say that that was reducing the trade deficit between the U.S. and China, and that would have been a partial victory. But what it would not have done would have been to address the long-term systemic issues that the U.S. has, and the president walked away from that proposal a couple of months ago. So he's really the decider on this, but I find that sort of two-step deal very difficult to anticipate coming together, largely because China resists so much dealing with the fundamental structure issues that are at the heart of this and that matter for the U.S. over the long term.
And have those issues in particular, the ones now, a matter of so much contention, been something that prior to this particular phase, in other words, in a prior administration, when you were in the U.S. Trade Representative's office, were you also operating on the premise that there would have to be changes to Chinese law in order to have an enforcement mechanism? Or what was the thinking at the time, and has it changed?
Sure. We were absolutely thinking that we would have to have changes in Chinese law. We were negotiating a bilateral investment treaty with China that would have required certain significant opening of the Chinese marketplace. One of the key issues of that negotiation, and quite frankly, one that was not resolved because the U.S. didn't get what we needed, was that China would have to open its markets in technology and innovative industries, cloud computing, and other ways to ensure that the U.S. could fully compete. At the end of our administration, we had not reached a deal, largely because China was unable to agree to those hard things. Those are many of the same things that the Trump administration is now proceeding on, but using the weapon of tariffs rather than the carrot of the investment treaty, which is how we were approaching it in the Obama administration.
So since you went there, let me wrap it up by asking you specifically about that. To the criticism that tariffs have obviously taken from many sides, including the president's own party at times. Can you say now that tariffs, albeit controversial, have actually worked, that they've brought the Chinese to the table in a way that other methods, diplomatic and otherwise, that you just mentioned, just weren't able to do?
Well, China was already at the table. This probably captured China's attention in a bigger way, but that captured China's attention over a year ago now, and we still have not seen the results of this action. So what we've seen are higher costs.
It's difficult, though. I mean, in fairness, the Chinese aren't going to move overnight. You had to get their attention, and now, the administration feels that it has to keep hitting and pounding and keep the pressure up to actually get a real deal.
Well, the pressure is heavily on the U.S. economy as much as it is on the Chinese economy. And again, the jury's still out. I hope we get a deal. There are significant problems in China that need to be addressed. Now that we've gone down this road of imposing tariffs, we need to really make sure that we get something for it that offsets and in long term offsets the loss to the U.S. consumers and long term establishes a more equal playing field for the United States on these core technology issues.